Today, we're talking about something I see quite a bit of in my work as a personal trainer, and that is this challenge of finding the middle ground during recovery. So, whether you are bouncing back from some type of surgery, or whether you're managing a chronic condition, or you're working through some type of injury, there is this tendency to swing in between the extremes. So we either go full on into it or we shut down completely. And this matters a lot as we're aging because our recovery is very, very important and very precious to us. We can't afford to keep taking these steps backward because we want to either maintain where we're at or we want to continue to improve, right? And so here's what I've learned after many years of working with my clients is that people find these lasting results and success when they don't push the hardest, when they actually find that sweet spot when it comes to dealing with some type of recovery process that they're going through. And I'm sharing this today because I have a client story that I really want to share with you, and it perfectly illustrates this struggle, and it might sound familiar to you. So, firstly, what I want to introduce to you is this thing called the weekend warrior pattern. So, let me tell you about my client. Her name is V, and during her sessions, when we get to a Monday, generally as a rule, we hear these words. I did too much on the weekend and I've aggravated my joint again. Now, V has an entire team of professionals helping her. She's got a surgeon, an osteopath, a physiotherapist. She's got me and probably countless other people as well too. And they're all telling her the same thing, which is to take it particularly easy with this joint. But she keeps pushing beyond what her body can handle right now. But here's what's really interesting is that there have also been periods when she has followed the recommendations, and guess what happened? Her pain was reduced, her function improved, and in her own words, she actually said, life is better all round. So she knows that it works, but she still struggles to stick with it. So her psychologist has identified that what she has is this black and white thinking, this all or nothing, where she really, really struggles with finding that middle ground, that sweet spot. But the real driver for her is fear. She has this big fear of losing her independence, of losing her mobility, of not being able to do the things that are important to her in life. Now, I totally understand that. And so, what happens in her mind is that she thinks that she's being a bit of a slacker if she's not putting in 100% effort. But she can put in that effort in other parts of her body, but just this particular part, she just needs to take it easy when it's been aggravated and when she's working with her team of healthcare professionals. And so I want to move on to this independence paradox. So this is where it gets really interesting. And it's something that I see with our older clients, and it's the very actions that we take to maintain our independence can actually threaten our independence. So I had to have this frank discussion with V, and I basically said to her, pushing yourself doesn't help you gain that strength while managing those aches and pains that you've got. what is actually doing is that it's taking you a step backward in your recovery, and there is so much more that we can do. So think about what happens when we consistently override the body's warning signals. We prolong inflammation in our body. We can create these wonky movement patterns, which can in turn cause new problems. And who wants that? I certainly don't. And we might even cause some type of structural damage that needs more serious intervention as well too. And so what we're doing there is, by doing too much, we're extending that actual recovery time. And then we're going to get frustrated with it, and we're going to feel worse overall. And so the research backs this up as well too. So studies on tissue healing shows that appropriate stress promotes recovery, but excessive stress delays it. So our bodies are remarkably good at healing when we give them the right conditions, when we listen to them and what they're telling us, right? And so what we want to do is we want to work with our brain. We don't want to fight it, because it does know what's going on. So when I was speaking with V about this black and white thinking, I decided that I would work with it rather than trying to fight it. So she struggles with finding this middle ground for herself. And so what I decided to do was create some type of clear boundaries that would give her this framework for success. So we developed, two lists basically. One that's safe and beneficial, and one that causes more harm and is definitely out of there. And by doing that, creating those boundaries, it automatically created this middle ground for her. And if you think about it, it's no different to dealing with your kids or your grandkids. When you're teaching them about different things that they need to do, you set these boundaries around them, these guidelines, and so they learn what works and what doesn't work, what they can do, what they can't do. And that's exactly what we needed to do to help V with this black and white thinking. So if you think about how you can apply this in your own life, we all know what traffic lights look like, right? We've got the green, the red, and the yellow. And so what you could do is you can create your own type of traffic light system. So the green zone are the things that are safe and beneficial. The yellow zone are the things that are okay to do, but not to push too hard. And that red zone, they're the things that you completely avoid. And so when you give yourself those specific boundaries, it removes that guesswork, and it gives your brain the structure that it really does need. And the key to this is building this body awareness. So you want to do that before, during, and after any type of activity that you do. You check in with yourself. You rate yourself on a discomfort scale. Your scale can be 1 to 5, 1 to 10. It doesn't matter, whatever works for you. And what you do is you notice those patterns. So when you do something in particular, so for example, you've got a really hilly backyard and you get out there and you mow that backyard, and then you find that your hip is playing up after you've done it and you've pushed yourself, then you know that maybe instead of pushing up the hill, maybe you need to go across the hills. That maybe you need to break it up into 2 different days and give yourself the recovery time in between. So you're thinking about what is happening with my body and paying attention to it more. So when we start to do that, we build this skill of listening to these signals rather than just simply overriding them. I think the next part of this is that we want to reframe middle ground as being a weakness, because sometimes we might think it is if we think we're not going hard enough. And we want to start to think about it as being a strength, because it does take discipline and self-awareness to operate in that middle ground zone. Now, I'm not suggesting that we don't go out and do that full-on stuff when we need to do it, or that we do that nice, gentle stuff when we need to do it as well too. But when we have injuries, when we have aches and pains, when we have anything that we're recovering from, we really do need to hone into our body a lot more and listen to it, so that that recovery process is a lot better and a lot shorter for us than continuing to aggravate it. And so there is this real wisdom that comes when we work with our body's signals. So if we think back to V, she wants to maintain her independence. She's very scared of not being able to do that. And that independence comes from having this sustainable management of our physical capabilities. And when we respect those current limitations that we have, we create the conditions for healing and ultimately expanding what we can do safely. So by addressing those underlying fears, we're doing it head on. And if we are worried about losing our independence, it's our opportunity to work with different types of healthcare professionals who can help develop this long-term plan that addresses it in a manner that's going to work for us. So what the biggest takeaway here is that we need to remember those small, sustainable steps that we take. They have dramatic steps on taking us forward or taking us backwards, depending on what we do. And I'm just thinking about another client of mine who has just recently had a fall. Not her fault. Someone else fell on top of her. And being someone who recently experienced this for myself, having someone push me and fall on top of me on a chairlift at the ski fields, I know what it's like to not have control over the situation, that you're in the hands of someone else. And so she is in plaster on her arm now. And so she can move her fingers. So the cast only comes down to the fingers. But I said to her, she said she wanted to keep working out. And I said, well, that's good, because we've got 650 muscles and we've got 206 bones in our body. So, there's lots of other things that we can work on as long as she was feeling up to it, and as long as we're taking that into consideration. And so after our PT session this week, I said to her, do you have an OT physio that you're working with, that you've got on board for when you get this plaster off and you go into rehab? Is there anything that you should be doing now? And she said, no, I haven't actually thought about that. And I said, well, okay, probably time to start thinking about that. And she said that, when she had this all done with her wrist and everything like that, she said, well, they said just to you rest it. And I said, yep, that's good. That's one side of it. But remember, there's always another side to it as well too. And that we want to give ourselves the best possible outcome that we possibly can do, right? To recover fully, to have that full range of motion. Having seen Paul go through something similar to this, and to have only now has half the strength that he has in his left hand, in his right hand, that I know how that has impacted the different things that he can do. So it's really important that we think about that rehab. We also think about factoring it into our daily routine as well too. So it's okay to get the list of things that we need to do, but we actually need to follow through as well too. So let's move on to wrapping this up, shall we? Now, I like to finish with a thing called move moment, and that's something that we can do either physically or mentally or emotionally. And today, I want you to create some type of middle ground assessment in your move moment. And so what I want you to do today is to just simply stand up and then notice how your body feels. Do this scan from the top of your head down to your toes. I want you to take these 3 deep breaths and just start to really feel, start to notice what is happening as you're doing these scans through your body. You're looking for tension, you're looking for tightness, discomfort, pain. Now, it could be that your neck moves better one way than the other when you start to move it. So you're just looking for those areas that could be causing you just a little bit of a niggle right now. But taking the next step on this is to think about what type of activity have you been avoiding because you're worrying about aggravating something. And I want you to think about how you might take that activity and scale it back a little bit. And I also want you to think about an activity that you've been pushing through, and when you push through, it doesn't feel great. And I want you to think about how you might scale that back. So we're thinking about something that we haven't been doing that we want to push through to, and something that we have been doing that we're noticing something happening from it, and we want to come back from that. And so I want you to experiment with this, giving yourself this middle ground. So creating those boundaries for yourself. What you're doing with this is teaching yourself those skills of listening to your body signals and responding appropriately rather than pushing, because that's what we do. So today we've been talking about this all or nothing black and white thinking and how it can sabotage any type of recovery journey, whether that's injury, whether that's some type of operation, whether that's some aches and pains, the list goes on. You know what you're recovering from. And what we're trying to do is establish some type of middle ground and think about it as not being less than, that we're actually trying to find those perfect conditions for healing so that we can do what we want to do. We also need to think about this, that by pushing through them, we're not actually limiting our independence in life. What we're doing is we're preserving independence because we're listening to what we can do right now. And as we recover from it, that we will get better. I also want you to think about those thinking patterns and setting those clear boundaries, because when you set those boundaries for yourself, you build that body awareness and you create that middle ground. So you're eliminating that all in or all out thinking that you might currently have as well too. And I want you to think about this, that finally, that finding balance is strength in your life. It is not weakness. And it's where the sustainability happens. So this week's challenge is to create some type of traffic light system for yourself where you tend to swing either all in or all out. And let me know about it. I'd love to hear about it. So I will see you on the next session. See you soon. Bye for now.